Well, as players are getting cut around the National Football League, it is creating opportunity and it's showing teams' hands bloom. And once we learn that, we can see who some of the sleepers are that fantasy GMs should be scooping up late in their drafts.
Yeah, see, so this is like a butterfly wings day. You might only feel not even a breeze, just a little puff of air. But by December, by 2024, if you're in dynasty leagues, these can become storms. These can become winds of change, hopefully winds that are at your back if you play fantasy football.
Yeah, winds of change continuing on. And maybe in Tampa, we had it wrong the entire offseason because it was Rashad White's day all day. And then Sean Tucker getting first team reps. Okay, is Tucker a sleeper that you would be targeting in your drafts?
If not draft, at least the waiver wire speed dial. Raheem Jarrett's another interesting guy there with Russell Gage going down. See, so I guess the headline here for Tampa is 6 undrafted free agents made it. 6.
Wow.
That's not good, right? I mean, it's good to and look, Tucker, Jarrett, I think Merriweather was another one a lot of people had draftable. Kudos to Tampa for bringing in these players and retaining them, but it just shows you where their roster is right now. And I guess it's another moment to say we're recording this on Tuesday, August 29th, final cutdown day, but really this event has ripples aftershocks for a week. And next Tuesday, I believe that's whenever the veteran contracts become guaranteed, right? If you're on a roster next Tuesday, your contract for the season becomes guaranteed. And that's the real true final day. But like you said, Cease, you can at least see some of these things. Players that teams believe they can't slip through to the practice squad. That's going to get set here soon, at least initial practice squads. And with Tucker, it was a medical situation that dropped him out of the draft, third, fourth round quality running back by many estimation. And what do we know about Chase Edmonds? He had his chance to shine for Miami last year and didn't come through. What do we know about Keyshawn Vaughn? Well, this was a player that the Bucks have wanted to get more out of and haven't been able to get out of. So this is a player, Tucker, who could ascend this depth chart really quickly. And if you believe that Rashad White is the starter by default, if you've been looking at him in the seventh, eighth round, even of your draft, and saying, I just can't take a starter by default, especially not one of the worst teams in the league. Ryan Jensen also retired, or did he
Yeah.
retire? I don't know if he retired. I shouldn't say that. That was kind of a Freudian slip. But Ryan Jensen out for the year. So things aren't going in the right direction, but that can create an opening for a player like Tucker and Cease. We've seen Austin Eckler. No, there's also, Philip Lindsay as a counterpoint, but Philip Lindsay helped you win in fantasy leagues. Undrafted free agent rookies, especially at running back, can matter in fantasy football. And Tucker doesn't have many obstacles in his way to matter this year.
Yeah, obstacles and culture are two things I'm looking at when we discuss undrafted free agents. And when we did Fessel OG last week,
Mhm.
and I was actually available because I was off air by the start of the draft, which is the first time in years. That's not the reason why I haven't won Fessel OG. But either way, when I took Jaleel McLaughlin in the 17th round, because I couldn't wait till 18, because I thought someone was going to snipe him from me, and legit, like people were like, "Who?
Yeah.
Who? Now who? Now that's the sleeper. That's my type of sleeper."
Yeah.
Now I
Yes.
understand we get a ton of questions from people like, "To give me some sleepers." Well, if I'm going to talk about Jaleel McLaughlin, you better be in a deep league, okay? But the culture that Sean Payton has built with the Denver Broncos is competition. And I'm not saying Javante is not the starter or Samaje isn't a nice backup because they're going to be in a 50-50 committee, everybody. But help me do the math, Bloom.
Yeah.
50-50 with this kid getting in who's the explosive back. Now, maybe it's only in games where they're going to get blown out or their potential is there. They're playing against the Chiefs or whatever. Nathaniel Hackett's mad at them in week 5 when they play the Jets, whatever. But Jaleel McLaughlin is the electric player. He's the explosive player of their before the 41 point whopping of the Rams in the preseason finale. Jaleel McLaughlin scored all but one of their touchdowns in the preseason.
Yeah.
He's an inside out runner. And you mentioned Philip Lindsay. Well, guess who Matt Waldman in January said that Jaleel McLaughlin was? Philip Lindsay with hands.
Right.
Sounds like a
Right.
sleeper if you're in deep enough leagues to me.
Yeah. And see, so let's walk through this. Okay. Why did Jaleel McLaughlin fall out of the draft?
People thought he was overworked because he's the all-time leading everything. He's
Right.
has like 8,000 yards rushing in
And
college.
what is height and weight?
He's a little guy.
Yeah, he's a little, really little, right? I mean,
He's
he's
not really little. He's about the same size as Philip Lindsay. Okay, there's really little,
well, that's true.
like tiny
He's not
guys.
Tutu Atwell, but I mean, he's like what
He's not Jakeem Grant,
he's
those guys.
5'7", 5'8", 180, 175, 180. Does that sound
Yeah, very compactly built. Right,
ballpark?
right, right.
Ballpark. There was a running back that was considered too small. Also worked really heavily in college. Got a couple of franchise tags from the Chargers, but it took going to the New Orleans Saints for Darren Sproles to finally be used in a way that
Mhm.
highlighted what he could do as a quote unquote undersized back. Who was the coach of that team? Uh,
Hmm.
hmm. So who's a
Hmm.
coach that we know can see in undersized backs even before the NFL spread out the field and adopted more college offense type concepts to make these lower BMI players really be able to fit in the NFL? Am I using BMI correctly? I don't even know. My point is, we're seeing more and more players in that 180-pound and below uh, weight range not just matter in fantasy football, but matter in the NFL, which is, of course, where it starts. And that's another reason I think we should be looking at McLaughlin and see. We can talk about Keaton Mitchell, very similar type player out of East Carolina. Looks like he's going to make the final roster in Baltimore. And we always stress this as we're about to switch from draft mode into be on your toes. Everything's going to start happening really fast, and you have to process and react and then start being ready to absorb more information all at a constant rate as a fantasy football player during the season. If a player makes the roster, and again, with the caveat that let's see, there's going to be some aftershocks and shifts, who's on the final roster a week from now, whether it's Mitchell, whether it's McLaughlin, if these teams have deemed they can play, especially as undrafted rookies, then we shouldn't put any artificial caps on what they can do if they get the chance. Some of them will.
Yeah, someone will get the chance. We'll be all over it for you every week, multiple times per week, right here on the Audible, as we look to a guy that I think you did a short on him. So let's get to another take because you mentioned Darren Sproles.
Yeah.
The Darren Sproles in this class was Deuce Vaughn.
Oh, yeah.
Period. Like there is none higher. Like Jaleel McLaughlin's Philip Lindsay with hands because Phil couldn't catch. Sorry, Phil. Deuce Vaughn is he's Darren Sproles, everybody.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
he's that type of foot frequency. I think it was Sproles that first revealed that because you used to say steps by yard,
Yeah.
and then found out okay, the scouts will call it foot frequency. So yeah, Deuce Vaughn's got it. Well, fantasy jams, you're thinking about sleepers. Maybe Deuce Vaughn should be on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. Deuce Vaughn should be on that list. And again, these aren't necessary players to draft. They're not even necessary players to put on waiver wire speed dial, but they're players that if events transpire to give them more opportunity, we're going to take notice and maybe even recommend a preemptive pickup. And Deuce Vaughn started out as a nice story. His dad, I think, is director or assistant director of college scouting for the Cowboys, called him, said, "You want to go to work with dad this week?" Beautiful story, but it's
Mhm.
turning into something that's maybe beautiful for this team. We're waiting on official word, but it sure looks like Malik Davis, last year's number 3, is not going to make the team. Rico Dowdle, who's a solid player for sure, go look him up in your RSPs, everybody. He probably would be next in line if Tony Pollard goes down. And why are we watching this situation closely? Because Tony Pollard, going back to his time at Memphis, has never proven that he can hold up under a heavy workload. And there are whispers or there's scuttlebutt that part of the reason he never consistently got more than 15 touches a game while we were watching him outplay Ezekiel Elliott was the team thought, well, if we go over that threshold, he wears down during games, he may wear down over the course of a season. If that comes to pass, now Dowdle will be see, we're going to get one of those waiver wire debates. This is one of the fun things we do on Tuesdays, right? Because
Right.
the dust is still settling from everything that happened on the weekend. And this is often the decisions that end up determining how your season goes in the end, right? When there's a running back injury, which running back you're going to pick up. Well, Dowdle's going to be the one in line to get more early down work. He's going to be the one in line probably to get short yardage work for touchdowns. But Vaughn, it's not just down to the Kansas State uniform that he resembles Darren Sproles from a trait standpoint, from the way that he brings these things to bear. But it actually seems like the Cowboys understand how to use him, right? It's
Right. Right.
it's it sounds kind of silly to say he's so short that the defense can't see him and then he just emerges. But That's
That's what
tactically
happens.
a pretty good way to sneak up on a defense. And then you have a player who might not even need the 15 touches a game, especially if he's getting work in the passing game. And I think Deuce Vaughn is a player sees that we also just have to look at when they pop in the preseason. When you're watching a player in the preseason, a rookie, and you see, okay, this guy really belongs, then we have to, again, not put an artificial cap on expectations. And I think absolutely Deuce Vaughn's performance in the preseason puts him in that needs more investigation. And we may get that opportunity if Tony Pollard can't hold up.
Now get this, follow this thread. No more Zeke in Dallas, but Zeke in New England, which means no more Pierre in New England, which means Pierre now with Nick Chubb. What? They just created a mess there. I think Cleveland might already have a mess. It's called their quarterback
Right.
situation. Although they do have the rookie
Yeah.
DTR. Yeah, man. Hey, teams make mistakes all the time. I'm not saying DTR will take over, but
Mm.
you might want to give him a look. See if you're Cleveland, might want to figure out what they're doing with Strong
Yeah.
behind Chubb, with Ford when he's healthy. What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? See, so we can't necessarily assume Cleveland is a rational organization at this point, or at the very least, maybe they're making rational moves now in response to some of the irrational moves that they made. I want to stop and really focus on that quarterback nugget just for a second for Superflex Dynasty players. Dorian Thompson Robinson is a player that it was somewhat divisive. I think there were people saying he doesn't really have an NFL future. And then there were people standing on the table for him and saying, athletically, what he's shown in his development got better every year, has worked with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly put a lot on his plate. And this is a good moment to say, we don't always understand context when we watch a player's college film.
Right.
When a coach is saying, I'm going to put all this stuff on your plate, I'm going to put a lot more responsibility on you than a college quarterback typically gets. And that quarterback functions and is competent under that kind of mental load. That can be really significant, even though when we watch the play, it just looks kind of mediocre, right? So I think with Thompson Robinson, the, sees how many quarterbacks have ever gotten fined for a block that was too vicious. Right? I mean, that's good stuff, man. That endears you to your teammates. Part of the quarterback position is having the trust and buy-in from your teammates. All right? That's part of it. So Dorian Thompson Robinson is a player. Also, of course, he has the athleticism, the running ability that we love for fantasy football. He has to be on a roster in every single Superflex Dynasty league with Josh Dobbs now getting traded. They're saying Dorian Thompson Robinson's ready if we need him. Now we move on to this running back situation. Pierre Strong last year looked fast. I mean, you saw that his speed translated. There's track
Right.
speed, there's even game speed when you're playing at a lower level of college football, but it translated. And we also had the debacle of Matt Patricia and Joe Judge and this idea that the Patriots are going to start running more outside zone and going away from their previous identity on offense. Well, that was a disaster. I think maybe the Pierre Strong pick, because Kevin Harris is a classic Patriots between the tackles back. Pierre Strong, on the other hand, was a speed back, more of a game breaker that you want to get out in space, or at the very least want to have him running stretch plays where he can put his foot in the ground and use that acceleration, use that straight line speed. So they didn't see a place for him. They've got some offensive tackle issues. So they got, I think, Tyrone Wheatley Jr. His dad played
Yes.
running back.
Right.
Now he plays offensive tackle. So Strong's interesting because I think this is an endorsement of Jerome Ford, even though he had a hamstring. They signed Jordan Wilkins. Jordan Wilkins, you remember in a previous life for the Colts, was a pretty good back. One of those guys that couldn't stay healthy, like Justin Jackson, right? These are a couple of guys that they sure look like good running backs when they could get opportunity, but they could never stay healthy and long enough to get a sustained opportunity. Justin Jackson retired this preseason, by the way, was on the Lions roster, was looking good too. So now you have Jerome Ford hurt most of the preseason. They expected him to be the backup, or at least have a chance to win the backup job. They bring in Jordan Wilkins whenever Ford gets hurt. Wilkins gets released. They trade for Pierre Strong. Pierre Strong is not an every down back. Pierre Strong is not one of those guys you say, well, we can just plug him right back in all the situations. So I'm not really sure what would happen if Nick Chubb would go down at this point. This one left me scratching my head a little bit, except they did get a good speed back who can add that element to their backfield. I just don't know if it really tells us what they think about Jerome Ford.
I don't want to turn this into a rally about DTR, but guess who stood on the table for DTR? Guess who got him at the Shrine Bowl? His name's Eric Galco, the guy who also got Brock Purdy at the Shrine game. He got Skylar Thompson at the Shrine game. So yeah, DTR. There were people in the scouting community, and certainly Galco, one of those people, one of those important people. He certainly was standing on the table for Dorian Thompson Robinson. We'll continue to watch that situation as it continues on. And hey, if you are the
Yeah.
Browns, well, you might have something there, Bloom. How about we do this? Arizona is a train wreck, but during these type of situations, there are players that can merge. I still love Michael Wilson for Dynasty. So we're talking sleepers. Everyone's saying Arizona. What is it's all this everything bad about Arizona? You could say yes, they're tanking. Yes, they're being obvious. Yes, they're terrible. Yes, this is awful. Marquise Brown might be traded. Like whatever. I'm still going to see who's still
Yeah.
balling in a bad situation. Who's still balling? Almost this whole season will be like the last preseason game where you're just like, well, none of this really matters. But
Right.
who's like got the effort, right? Who's trying? Who's working it out there? Michael Wilson, more dynasty
Sure.
Bloom for this conversation. But yeah, I think there's a conversation about Arizona where we're gonna find out who wants to play.
Yeah.
Then we'll find out, what's Caleb Williams look
Right.
like
Right.
as he's leading the team
Right. Who
next year.
can play. And I think
Right.
that at least some people I trust have said, well, Colt McCoy was released because he just his arm is shot, his elbow shot. And they tried, he couldn't really throw on consecutive days. And finally they just said, well, it's not going to happen. And hence the trade for Dobbs, who continues to hang around. And now you have Dobbs or Clayton Tune. Tune's interesting. He's a winner. He's got some athleticism. He's a gamer. And sometimes these guys surprise us. See, I think there's probably at least one or two quarterbacks that would have at least become like a Case Keenum if they had gotten a chance that just never got the chance. And we don't even remember them because they never got the chance. Clayton Tune might get a chance. That's something to watch in your Superflex Dynasty leagues. You brought up Michael Wilson, and I like the way you tapped the brakes and said, in the future, because that's the thing. You've got Trey McBride and Zach Ertz. You've got Marquise Brown. You've got Rondale Moore. So you have a subpar passing game, to say the least. And it's a passing game with a wide target tree. That's no good. It also probably makes you back off of James Conner. See, it's the big question I have. Again, you hear the whispers. Could the Cardinals trade Kyler Murray? Are they shopping Kyler Murray? Right? Or alternatively, is Kyler Murray even going to play this year? I think that they probably are in no hurry to get Murray back on the field.
Yeah, are they trading Marquise Brown? Would you like some tea,
Oh,
Bloom?
green tea. I've heard it's really good for your dental health,
Mhm.
actually. Green tea.
Ah,
Today's health tip
good,
brought to you
good.
by the Audible.
Brought to you by footballguys.com. It's all about staying healthy. There are things that I have to
Mm.
say and wait to say because if I say them, there are people
Yes.
that will
Private
steal them
eyes
and run with it as
are
their own
watching
take,
you. Yeah.
which is fine. It's kind of crappy as I clean it up. Sorry, Joe. I've saved this one for some
Ooh.
time. For this show,
Mm.
for
A
you, Bloom.
vintage wine.
I've
Let's
saved
crack
it
it
for you.
open. Let's have a glass.
Let's crack that thing open. This also has an addendum, which I love, and it's about Tyson
Oh,
Badgett.
yes.
Um, Listen, that kid can play. Now, here's the great thing. I've talked to current and former teammates of Justin Fields. He's getting it. I understand people are these passes are off. Like, who gives a crap if DJ Moore's catching that 3-yard pass and it's at the top of the grass and he takes it 80 yards to the house? Like, I want everyone to know that the things you're seeing about Justin Fields, like he's getting it. His former teammates said he was getting it last year. Like you could see the light bulb, like the ability as a passer come through. I've had current teammates tell me he's Michael Vick, but larger. Like, so feel great about Justin Fields. If Justin Fields was the number one fantasy quarterback this year, nobody should be surprised. Tyson Badgett can ball. Now, he's not going to take Justin Fields' spot, but you want to recognize that when we see this, is it him or Nathan Peterman? Like, we know the answer. We know the answer. And Bloom, anytime you can highlight a small school athlete, 0-star recruit, was at the
Mhm,
Senior Bowl,
mhm.
by the way, 0-star recruit, that makes it to the NFL and then shows he belongs. Hell yeah, in deep dynasty, I'm putting a pin in him.
Yes, and again, Superflex dynasty leagues. This is fun. Getting these guys on your roster early can matter. And another thing that this reminds me about is what matters in the preseason. Well, probably the easiest and first thing, other than injuries, is how do the rookies play. So, not that PJ Walker is any kind of coveted player, but the Bears say no. This is just like DTR in Cleveland. We have a rookie maybe we didn't expect a lot from right away. There's at least somebody we can feel comfortable going into games saying, well, if the starter gets hurt, and hey, Justin Fields did get a little banged up last year, right? He puts himself at harm's risk there. Now we have Badgett. Cease. I'm thinking of Chicago, right? Like, how regarded was Tony Romo? Where did Tony
Mhm.
Romo play? How much radar was he even on the Senior Bowl radar? No. So we have
Yeah, I
quarterbacks.
don't think he was at any of the All-Star
No.
games. Jimmy G was. Jimmy
Right.
G was
Yeah,
at
he was a
both
second round
Eastern
pick.
Illinois guys,
Yeah,
but there was a difference. Romo was
right.
undrafted.
My point is simply this, especially the quarterback position, Cease, especially the quarterback. Let's get a little in depth here. It's a little touchy feely. This is fun, right? Quarterback, even though we like to focus on the physical traits, those are easy to quantify and especially important for fantasy football because of runners. Truly lasting in the NFL quarterback, it's a mental, spiritual, emotional position first and foremost. And of course, teams are going to be reluctant to put any kind of stock in a player, no matter how good they look, when they look good against a lower level of competition, right? Trey Lance is probably looming right now in teams' minds. See, it's obvious as an aside. I was really surprised that we haven't really done a show since the Trey Lance trade. Look at what was traded for Carson Wentz. Look at what was traded for Sam Darnold. Look at what was traded for
Right.
other, even Josh Rosen, right? Other quarterbacks. There really must be some back channel talking about Trey Lance, just like dragging his name through the mud, right? I mean, just people are saying nothing. There's nothing there. It's just a waste for how little we've seen affirmatively. Cannot really confirm or disconfirm whether he can play yet. Yet here we are. Although I,
Well, you and I are both
yeah,
counterculture to various
sure.
degrees, which is interesting. But I'm
Oh
rooting for Trey
gosh,
Lance,
yes,
knowing more stuff behind the
yes,
scenes. Most of what you hear about Trey Lance is
yes.
BS. I have to clean it up for Joe and for YouTube. We don't want to be
Right.
demonetized, but I know quite a bit behind the scene. I know about his arm fatigue as a rookie that people denied that was actually true. Um, yeah, I'm rooting for him, and if you actually watch the film, preseason film, but if you actually watch the film, you see advancement as a
Yeah.
passer, and he's not that athletic. That's the thing. I got in an argument with somebody. I won't say who, because they were like, "He's so athletic." I'm like, "No, he's not real intentional as a
Mhm.
runner. Like Brock Purdy is intentional as a runner. I think Trey Lance is more on the Carson Wentz athleticism. We're like, he can get out a little bit and scoot a little bit, but we're not talking about it, Justin. And in fact, this person I was arguing with brought up Justin Fields. This gets us back to the Chicago thing. But like Justin Fields is Vic in Josh Allen's body. Okay. Trey Lance is not that athletic when it comes to intentional running. If running a 40-yard dash, like, yes, there's some athleticism. But I think people kind of over assume his athleticism, and actually that's not the part of his game you want to focus on.
Yeah, what I liked about him as a runner, we can go down the Trey Lance rabbit trail, but we need to, uh, because it was a lot. the other shoe dropping going back to whenever that trade was announced in February that the 49ers are moving up. He finishes his runs. He has a competitive toughness about his runs that I think allows you to get more out of that tool. But I only bring up Trey Lance uh, when we look at Bajent to say that teams are going to intentionally underestimate small school quarterbacks. I mean, they're going to say, I need to see it before I believe it. The Bears saw it. And based on these moves, they believe it.
That's right. It is the Audible. It's footballguys.com. Do those YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And thank you all very much for helping us grow the YouTube channel. He's Sigmund. I'm Cecil. We are the Audible, everyone. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you're appreciated. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty